Ever heard of a trail that leads you nowhere but back to yourself? Deep in the mountains of Colorado, there's a hiking path whispered about by locals, a place that seems to have fallen off the map. They call it the Devil's Loop Trail. The legend is simple, yet chilling. No matter how far you walk, you always end up right back where you started. Back in 2003, two adventurous hikers, let's call them Mark and David, decided to challenge the myth. They were experienced, skeptical, and ready for whatever the trail had to throw at them. They started at the crack of dawn, the air crisp with mountain chill. To be scientific about it, they decided to mark their path, tying bright red flagging tape to a tree every 100 meters. This way, they'd know for sure if they were looping. The first few hours were normal. The sun climbed higher, dappling the forest floor with light. They joked, pointed out landmarks, and felt confident. But as noon approached, a strange stillness fell over the woods. It was an unnatural quiet. The wind died down completely. The usual chirping of birds and rustling of squirrels vanished. The only sound left was the crunch of their own boots on the dirt path. It was unsettling, like the entire forest was holding its breath. They kept pushing forward, the silence weighing on them. They stopped for a water break, leaning against an old pine. Mark scanned the trail ahead, and that's when his heart dropped. There, just up the path, tied to a familiar-looking tree, was a piece of bright red tape. Their tape. It was impossible. They had been walking for hours, meticulously marking their progress. To see one of their own markers ahead of them meant they had somehow circled back. But how? They hadn't made any turns. David pulled out his GPS, his hands trembling slightly. This was the part that made no sense. According to the device, they had traveled a near-perfect straight line, covering over 5 kilometers from their starting point. How could they be in a straight line and in a loop at the same time? The physics of it was mind-bending. The trail was playing tricks on them, or worse, reality itself was bending around them. A cold dread began to seep in. Mark, the older of the two, had seen enough. "We're turning back," he said, his voice firm. "This isn't right." But David wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on a spot deeper in the woods, between 2 thick spruce trees. He raised a hand, pointing. Standing unnervingly still was a figure. It was too far to make out details, but it was clearly a person, wearing a bright red jacket, a jacket that looked exactly like the one David was wearing. "Hey!" David shouted, his voice cracking. "Hello!" The figure didn't respond. It didn't wave. It didn't move. It just stood there, a silent, motionless twin in the darkening woods. Then, slowly, with an unnatural creak that seemed to echo in the dead air, it tilted its head to the side. That was it. Primal fear took over. They didn't need another sign. They turned and ran. They didn't look back, didn't check the GPS, just sprinted down the path, branches whipping at their faces. They ran until their lungs burned, until the oppressive silence of the deep woods was replaced by the familiar sounds of the trailhead. They burst out of the tree line and found themselves back in the parking lot. Relief washed over them, but it was short-lived. Something was wrong. Their car, which they had parked just that morning, was covered in a thick layer of pine needles. The clock on the dashboard blinked at them. 3 days had passed. 3 days they couldn't account for. Lost to the loop. They never went back, but the story lives on. Hikers who still dare to venture near the Devil's Loop Trail share the same warning. If you walk too far, if you ignore the signs and push deeper into the quiet, you might just meet yourself coming back, and you might not like who you find waiting. Thanks for listening to this strange tale. If you enjoy stories that blur the line between reality and the unexplained, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Stay safe out there, and maybe stick to the marked trail.